Welcome to this special 350th edition of the Business of Story. I'm Howell, and I'm so glad you're here to celebrate this with us because we're going on 7 years of producing our weekly show, and a really cool thing just happened. FeedSpot just named us the #1 business storytelling podcast for 2022. I'm pretty proud of that. A lot of work and effort and passion goes into this show. And right when I'm thinking like, man, is it all worthwhile? Then I get some really cool, amazing emails and IMs from listeners out there that says, keep doing what you're doing. So we will. And I really appreciate you being here and supporting the show. Now today, as this show goes live, it's Monday, March 14th, 2022. And coinciding with the release of this episode, I am literally at Social Media Marketing World right now sharing my Business of Story workshop on brand story strategy. And I'm doing it for the 6th year in a row, which I think is pretty cool, minus, of course, that whole COVID thing last year. So I thought I'd celebrate this special edition by helping you craft your brand story strategy right now by quickly, and might I add deftly, taking you through the 10-step story cycle system. So in the time it will take you to plug in your earbuds and go for a 5-miler or make your way home in rush hour traffic, at the end of either one of those excursions, you just may have a new and improved strategy for how to differentiate your brand in our crowded, noisy world, and to know how to tell your refined and persuasive story, or stories, actually. This is perfect timing, too, because next week I have on the show legendary Silicon Valley marketer, pirate, and category king of brand category design, Christopher Lockett. He'll help you share and profit from your brand content using the direct-to-creator model. But you have to have your brand stories dialed in first, and that's exactly what we are going to do together today. Almost 2 years ago, I published my first book, Brand Bewitchery: How to Wield the Story Cycle System to Craft Spell-Binding Stories for Your Brand. It guides you through the story cycle system to create your brand story strategy, and it shares loads of examples illustrating how the process has grown brands by as much as 600%. Plus, Brand Bewitchery also shows you how to craft and share your stories using, of course, the ABT Foundational Narrative Framework, where, as you know by now, I believe all persuasive business storytelling starts. And you learn the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact that makes your business points for you in under 60 seconds. All while Brand Bewitchery takes you chapter by chapter through the 10-step story cycle system with exercises that shape your story. Now, I just subscribed to Blinkist, which is like the Cliff Notes of the internet. Blinkist shares the main points of over 5,000 books in their library that you can read or listen to in about 15 minutes. It's absolutely brilliant. And I even like their tagline, more knowledge in less time. It was Blinkist that gave me the idea for this special 350th edition of the Business of Story, where I will take you through the story cycle system very, very quickly. Now, it may be a little bit longer than 15 minutes, but that's okay because, well, you and your story just deserves more time and attention. I'm even going to Blinkist, yes, I've now made that a verb, the preface to Brand Bewitchery, and read that to you, the shorter version. And I'm going to call out the main points. Now, why am I doing this? Because if you hear these points and none of them resonate with you, then maybe this episode's not for you. So let's see. Brand Bewitchery, the preface. In March 2019, I sniffed into an old claustrophobic bookstore in Queenscliff, Australia, like a mouse searching for cheese. You know how people sometimes look like they're dogs? Well, Pete, the proprietor, resembled his store, rather disheveled, with a somewhat bedeviling manner of answering my questions with his questions that coaxed me in deeper. You got the sense he was daring you to judge him by his cover, which apparently I was. The labyrinth of For Pete's Sake bookshop on Hess Street feels like the clogged arteries of a chain reader. And I swear that the 9-foot musty walls of sagging bookshelves and piles of tomes were going to avalanche at any moment. But there they had stood, for what appears decades, a swollen fruit cellar of stories preserved in time, radiating an alluring energy, quaking with inquisitiveness. "Where do you find all these books?" I asked Pete. "Oh, I don't find them. They find me." The attraction of story. Stories have a way of summoning forces, especially the stories we tell ourselves. Perhaps as a leader of a purpose-driven brand, you have created one or several of the following personal narratives. And could that explain why this book has attracted you? "We're growing, but we're not differentiated from our competition, and that scares the hell out of me." Or, "We're adding lots of team members, but we can't get them all pulling in the same direction for lack of a story they can buy into and align with." There's also, "I was so embarrassed the other day when an investor asked me what our story was, and I had to tell them I didn't have one." Or, "I want my lifestyle business to have a greater impact in the world, but I need to find a way to stand out." Finally, "I've had a successful career, but now I want to make it significant by developing my personal, professional brand story." One thing is certain, life is chaotic. Storytelling is the remedy that we seek to create meaning out of the madness of being alive. I have found, as you will too, that when you craft and tell your compelling brand story, you will increase your influence as a leader, grow your organization and your people, and evolve a successful career into a significant one. But you have to understand the magic to cast the spell. That's what drives me to share with you what I've learned about the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling. This is not so much a storytelling guide as it is an instruction manual on how to realize the influence and impact that is pent up within your brand, just waiting to be released through the stories you conjure. You will use these storytelling spells to become a formidable leader who can nudge the world in any direction you choose. So choose wisely. Plus, this book is designed to reignite within you the one true superpower we all possess, storytelling, by teaching you captivating narrative frameworks to enchant your audiences. Soon you'll find that storytelling is your most valuable and yet underutilized business asset. You'll realize a whole new competitive edge to dramatically increase revenues, summon the focused forces of your team, and excel through the stories you tell. So I'm curious, did you find this book or did it find you? Now, for all of you who are asking for the Audible version of Brand Bewitchery, it's coming. It'll still be out a couple months, but there you had a little taste of the preface. Okay, so let's start with the abridged version of the story cycle system. I'll walk you quickly through all 10 steps so you get the lay of the land. Some of the story answers you seek may just come to light as we go through, I guess, what is a lightning round of the story cycle. But you may be asking yourself this one question. Park, lately you've been dismissing these longer, more complex story structures like the 12 to 17 steps of the hero's journey, Blake Snyder's 15 beats to story, even the 8 or so steps of the Pixar way for business storytelling. You have even said your 10-step story cycle system is too complex for most storytellers. But now you're here promoting it. What the heck? Well, good question. And let me clarify. If you, like most business people, want to become a more confident, compelling, and persuasive communicator, then yes, all of the aforementioned frameworks are way too complex. Look, You're an executive, not a Hollywood screenwriter. Leave the story theory to them and simply use the ABT and the 5 primal elements to a short story for big impact. That's all you need to become a very persuasive, confident, and compelling business communicator. But if you want to craft an overarching brand story narrative strategy, not telling your story, but essentially outlining the screenplay or narrative arc for it that will separate you from all of your competition and create real meaning about you and your offering for your customers, for your colleagues, and for the communities you serve, then by all means, use the story cycle system, which is totally inspired by Joseph Campbell, Blake Snyder, Pixar, and other great storytellers and their frameworks. As I say in the book, quote, "The story cycle is distilled from the timeless narrative structure of the ancients, inspired by the story artists of Hollywood, influenced by masters of persuasion, guided by trend spotters, and informed by how the human mind grapples for meaning." Now here's the deal. The story cycle will not teach you how to tell your story better, but it is ideal to help you understand what stories to tell about your brand, to whom, when, and where. So let's get started with a quick trip through the 10 steps of the story cycle system, which include backstory, hero, stakes, disruption, antagonists, mentor, journey, success, moral, and ritual. Now, for those of you listeners who know about the ABT, the and, but, therefore foundational narrative framework, please realize that the 10 steps of the story cycle are actually broken down into the 3-act structure of the ABT, capitalizing on the 3 forces of story, which include agreement, contradiction, and consequence. Our cause and effect, pattern-seeking limbic brain loves this story structure. And that's important because it is in this primal part of our subconscious mind where all of our real buying decisions are being made. That's why I begin all of my Business of Story masterclasses and mastery courses by coaching and teaching the ABT. So think of the story cycle with this ABT structure in mind. The first 3 chapters of backstory, hero, and stakes essentially are the and statement of agreement in the ABT. This is where we set the stage for your brand story by exploring your unique position in the marketplace, your backstory. Introduce the hero of your story, and spoiler alert, it's not you, but your number 1 customer who is at the center of your brand story, basically your chief protagonist. And the 3rd chapter of stakes. What does your customer hero wish for emotionally and want to buy physically to fulfill their wish? After all, your brand, just like Walt Disney said about his company, is in the wish-fulfilling business. So that's Act 1, defining your category king position in the market in service to your number 1 customer by fulfilling their emotional need through your physical product or service offering. Simple enough, right? Now, chapters 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the story cycle represent the but statement of contradiction in the ABT. Or think of it as the problem you and your brand are uniquely equipped to solve for your customer. So, following backstory, hero, and stakes is chapter 4 called disruption. What is changing in your customer's life that is shaking them out of status quo and into your new world? This is where I'll ask you to craft your unique value proposition based on the insights you've gained from your exploration and discovery in the first 4 chapters. You'll then put your unique value prop to the test in the following chapters, which ultimately means rewriting it like 10 times until you absolutely nail it. On the heels of Chapter 4, Disruption, we move into Chapter 5 called Antagonists. Here you will identify what are the obstacles and antagonists standing in the way of a prospect converting to a customer. It may seem counterintuitive, but what I want you to do is embrace these story forces because you can leverage their power, the power of these anti-stories about you and your offering by telling them a more powerful story about what success will look like if they can manage the courage to move forward. But to be successful, you need to truly understand what your audience wants, empathize with why they don't have it, and appreciate what it will take for them to get it by working with you, warts and all. We are still squarely in the ABT section of Act 2 in the story cycle system as we move into Chapter 6, The Mentor. And guess what? This chapter is all about you and how your brand is uniquely equipped better than anyone else to help your customers get what they want out of life. Here, we don't have to dwell on what you make, the bricks and mortar nuts and bolts of your physical offering, because we've already identified that in the first 3 chapters. Now we want to know how you show up emotionally in the hearts and minds of your customers. How do you humanize your brand? By identifying your primary character archetype, the emotional promise your people experience when interacting with your brand and its story, and the gift they receive, essentially how you fulfill their wishes through your offering. Rounding out the action of Act 2 is Chapter 7 called Journey. Everything leading up to Chapter 7 has been really about understanding your audience, empathizing with what they wish for, acknowledging what has changed in their world that's knocking them out of status quo, appreciating the obstacles and antagonists they're confronting both internally and externally, and sharing with them how you are uniquely equipped to help them get what they want out of life. Now you join them on their journey in 3 steps. Brand awareness, when they are introduced to your story. Brand adoption, when they buy into your story for the first time. And brand appreciation, when they become a repeat customer, sharing your story with their world. It's important in this chapter to know, to identify, to just absolutely highlight which prospects or customers are in what step on their journey so you know which stories to share with them. Now you're probably really seeing how the story cycle system is a story strategy framework, not one necessarily used in and of itself just to become a more powerful storyteller. However, in reading of the book, Brand Bewitchery, and the building of your brand story, you will naturally become a more confident and compelling storyteller, especially as you use the ABT in the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact in how you express your story to the world. All right. This leads you out of Act 2 of the ABT into the final resolution of Act 3 in the story cycle system. This essentially is the therefore statement of consequence as the final element in the 3 forces of story: agreement, contradiction, consequence. This final act begins with Chapter 8 called Success. After everything your customer has been through with you, therefore, what does success look like? And more importantly, what does success feel like to them? It's important to understand the end game of Chapter 8 from the very beginning because it is these 2 outcomes, what does success look and feel like to your customer, that is the guiding light, your North Star when crafting your overarching brand story strategy. Just ask yourself this question: how do I transport my customer from their world into my world, fulfilling their emotional wish through our physical offering, and how will we know they have arrived through what they witness and feel? It's character art that comes down to this one all-important brand story strategy element. Quote, your brand story is not about what you make, but what you make happen in the lives of your customers, your colleagues, and the communities you serve. Get this right, and everything flows into Chapter 9, where you use everything you've learned on your story cycle system journey to define your brand's purpose, what it stands for that makes it stand out in the world. Essentially, this is the moral of your story. Finally, you arrive at Chapter 10 called Ritual. Why ritual? People ask me that all the time. Because the story cycle system, unlike the closed one-and-done circle of the hero's journey, is a virtuous spiral which expands customer engagement with your story, with your offering, with your people, and your prestige in the world with every revolution from brand awareness to brand adoption to brand appreciation. It is not a one-and-done thing. It is a virtuous cycle, as I mentioned, and the goal is not to only build repeat business by welcoming your customer into your story to make it their story, but to have them share your story with their world. Because, well, great stories are immensely scalable. So let's do a quick review. The ABT of the story cycle system. The AND Statement of Agreement, or Act 1, includes your backstory as defined by your number one category king position in the market. Introducing the hero of your brand story, your number one customer, and what's at stake for them. What do they wish for and want that you can fulfill for them? The but section of contradiction, conflict, and problem definition begins at Chapter 4, Disruption. My customer wishes for this and wants that, but doesn't have it because of the disruption happening all around them. Then you raise the stakes by introducing the obstacles and antagonists standing in their way that, when overcome with your help, further establishes your category king position as their go-to resource. While in the mayhem of the but section, you introduce your brand as their mentor and how you are uniquely equipped to help them get what they want out of life. Then the real journey begins, from brand awareness, adoption, to appreciation, and how you engage your prospects and customers in each of these three steps. The but section resolves into the final act, the therefore of the ABT. Therefore, what does success look and feel like to your audiences? Therefore, how does all of the action in the previous 8 chapters level you up to defining your unique purpose in the world? What you stand for that makes you stand out, the moral of your brand story. And finally, therefore, how do you scale your brand story through repeat business and free word-of-mouth marketing, by far the most powerful form of advertising there is? That's why we call it story marketing. Now, this Blinkist reduction of the main points of brand bewitchery may be all you need to get started crafting a more compelling and persuasive overarching narrative for your brand. If so, cool, you're done here. But if you want to take a deeper dive into each of the 10 steps of the story cycle with an exercise to use after every step, then please listen on. But first, this message from me. As an avid business story listener, you know by now that all compelling and persuasive business storytelling does not begin with the 10-step story cycle system brand story strategy framework, but with the ABT. And that is precisely where you should begin, starting with one or both of our quick online courses. If you're focused on sales, and who isn't, dive into the ABTs of Selling course. In under 18 minutes, through 3 short videos by me, I will take you through how to use the ABT to make all of your sales messaging, from enticing prospecting emails to hook 'em from the start sales presentations to pain point listening and overcoming objections. Or maybe you want to start dialing in your brand story using our new ABTs of Branding course, which is a little bit longer, but still under 30 minutes, as we share loads of branding examples using the ABT. And since this is my special 350th episode of the Business of Story, you will save 35% off the $35 courses. Just use promo code 350ABT. That's 350ABT for your 35% savings. But it's only good through the end of this month, March 2022, which gives you like 2 weeks to register for the course, but the course will be open for you forever after that. That's why it's important to tune into the Business of Story right when we air our new episodes so you don't miss out on great offers like this one. So take one or both of our quick ABT online courses right now and save 35% for this invaluable training. You'll find links to the show notes, or come on over to businessofstory.com and you'll find them there. Or you can even go directly to Thinkific at businessofstory.thinkific.com. And as a final treat or challenge, if you would like to build your ABT live on the Business of Story with me, take either one of the courses, and I'll pick 4 or 5 people to work with right here on the show. You could be one of them. Here's what Christopher Lochhead, my guest next week, and of course the category king of brand category design, thinks of the ABT.
So you gave me a gift with the ABT because, and you and I have talked about this before on both of our podcasts, in category design, we have this thing called a POV, a point of view. And it is simply structured very similarly to that of the ABT, which is essentially, and this is such a profound insight, it sounds like it's nothing, just like the ABT. It's so simple, you can't imagine how profound it is. But it goes like, in a point of view, it goes like this. Nobody buys a solution until they have a f***ing problem. And so a point of view starts with articulating, framing, naming, and claiming a problem. Well, we can relate to that problem. That then sets up the solution. And when people understand the problem/opportunity, then they become interested in the solution. And then, of course, the third piece from a POV perspective is how your product or service, or your idea for that matter, you might not be actually marketing or selling anything, bridges the gap between the problem/opportunity and therefore the solution. Okay, so with all that said, why do I love the ABT? The ABT takes the thinking that we did around points of view and does a fantastic, legendary double click on it. And says, here is a shit simple, insanely powerful way to write an instant POV. And that's why the and, but, and therefore model is pure genius. It allows you to relate to people, then it gives them the but, which tees up the problem, and then the therefore, which points the way to the different future, aka solution. And so it's pure genius. And it's easily rememberable, and if you start to play with it, as I have since you taught it to me, just like anything else, you develop some prowess with it, it starts working, you're like, wow, it's almost weird how this works.
So there you have it, the power of the ABT, so elegantly articulated by legendary Silicon Valley marketer Christopher Lochhead. Register for your course right now, the ABTs of branding or the ABTs of selling at businessofstory.thinkific.com. 35% off the $35 investment now through the end of March 2022. So get after it. Okay, so are you ready for the second half of our special episode number 350 show? Now, we'll do a deeper dive into each of the 10 steps of the story cycle system with the exercises you can use to craft your brand story strategy every step of the way. Starting with Chapter 1, your backstory. You have to set the scene for your brand story by defining how you and your brand show up in the market. You do that by drafting your position statement. Here's an exercise I love to use to help you define your number one position. Okay, so pull out a piece of paper or jot down these categories on a digital device, whatever you want to do. From top to bottom, these 4 categories. Industry, followed by category, specialty, followed by your number one specialty. This helps you get super focused on that one thing you do better than anyone else. Then, of course, you're going to write an ABT as your position statement. For instance, for the business of story at the highest of levels, I work in the communications industry, along with millions of other companies and people. To narrow my focus a bit, the category in the communications industry I operate in is, broadly speaking, advertising, marketing, and sales. Now we're starting to get a little bit more focus. My specialty within this category is strategic brand storytelling. And my number one specialty reads, The Business of Story is the number one resource for leaders of purpose-driven brands to align their people, engage their customers, and build trust for their offering using the proven power of the story cycle system. Now, to begin humanizing the mechanical nature of this functional position statement and start teeing up the personality of the brand, I like to use the following ABT that speaks directly to my customer. You communicate and care, but don't connect like you could because you lead with logic and reason when what your audience really wants is the emotional appeal of a story. Therefore, immediately hack through the noise and hook the hearts of your audience using the 3 proven narrative frameworks only found at the Business of Story. That's what you want to do in Chapter 1, your backstory. Use the first industry/category/specialty/number 1 specialty exercise to dial in your functional position statement. Then humanize it by writing it as an ABT. Now, on to Chapter 2, heroes. What I want you to do is identify and then prioritize your top 3 customers, including internal audiences like colleagues, stakeholders, vendors, external audiences as in customers, and a community audience like people that don't necessarily work for you and maybe will never buy from you, but are important to have on your side. Name these 3 audiences and then work with the number 1 most important audience who is sitting right at the top of your list. It may be your internal team to get them to buy into your new brand story first so that they can own it and share it with their worlds. Or maybe you've already gotten buy-in from your colleagues, so your number 1 audience is actually your number 1 customer. They are at the top of your list. Whomever. But no matter what, pick one audience that you will use for the rest of the story cycle process. Then when you're finished, you'll see your other audiences easily meld into your overarching brand story strategy. For example, Alice Hyman is a sought-after sales strategist and coach. We helped her with her brand story, and through the process, we learned that she attracts a number of different audiences, including sales professionals, chief revenue officers, and sales enablement leaders. But her number 1 audience is CEOs. Sure, Alice can and does service those other people, but she is laser focused on helping CEOs get their sales strategy straight so they can ignite the sales and resulting revenue for all. So to differentiate herself in the extremely crowded and competitive sales consulting world, Alice focuses only on CEOs. From her backstory, her industry is business services, followed by the category of sales consulting for the complex sale. Her specialty is as the values to valuation sales strategist, and her number 1 specialty or position statement is for CEOs with exceptional growth potential. Alice Hyman makes your complex sales easy with a spirited strategy based on your value to compound the valuation of your organization. Okay, that's her nitty-gritty, rubber meets the road functional position statement where every brand story starts. Now she humanizes it by placing her number 1 customer at the center of her story with an ABT, which resides at the top of her homepage at alicehyman.com. Quote, as the CEO of an innovative company that sells to customers 10 times to 100 times your size, growing sales revenue is critical to earn the valuation you deserve. But your sale is complex and you're making it more difficult than it should be because you don't have the proper structure in place. And you're allowing your team to use outdated and ineffective methods. Therefore, accelerate your sales and increase the value of your company with Alice Hyman. Alice has designed her category as the sales strategist for CEOs. And you know what? We're just in the first 2 steps of the story cycle system. So your exercise here is to prioritize your top 3 audiences and then work as a specialist for your number 1 customer, because that group will be responsible for probably north of 80% of your sales. It's that important. By the way, you can hear Alice tell her story on the Business of Story, show number 320, called The Stories CEOs Are Telling That Prevent Sales. See how focused her brand story and messaging is now? Next up, I want you to determine what's at stake for your number one audience. What do they wish for and want? This is what we cover in Chapter 3 of the Story Cycle System, called Stakes, and it's where you really start to define your category. For instance, the all-natural allergy supplement of Heirloom is a great example of how the backstory, hero, and stakes chapters come together to design a category by defining the brand's POV, or point of view, as I've learned it from Christopher Lockhead. Heirloom has an amazing origin story from internationally acclaimed spinal surgeon Shyam Sridharani, who found his wife Avni laying prone on the living room floor one day after surgery as her allergy meds were destroying her body. You can hear the entire story told by them on show number 237 right here on The Business of Story. How to dominate a market category with your brand origin story. After creating their position statement, identifying their number one customer as the mindful consumer, aka yoga practitioners, and understanding that they wish for safe, all-natural allergy relief and want a product that they can trust, we developed the following brand POV. Listen for the embedded ABTs throughout. Here we go. How many times do you breathe each day? About 20,000 inhales and exhales. And that's not always easy if you suffer from airborne allergens. Some 50 million Americans do, 75% of which still rely on over-the-counter medications. But they don't realize that these drugs are often ineffective and could be making them even sicker. WebMD lists 34 side effects to common allergy meds, including dry mouth, drowsiness, itching, irritability, and nightmares. But they don't mention what other studies have found, that prescription and OTC allergy drugs can lead to cognitive impairment, including a lowered IQ and potential increases in dementia and Alzheimer's. When it comes to understanding the true impacts of allergy meds, Americans are suffering from a severe case of mental mucus. Until now, introducing Heirloom for conscious allergy relief. Heirloom is the smartest all-natural support for allergy season, with the most potent herbal supplement formulation designed for people mindful toward their mind and body. It's small batch, fresh allergy relief centered on clearing the air about the environmental and big pharma impacts of allergy season on you, so you can inhale a healthy dose of life again. So your exercise in Chapter 3 of the Story Cycle System is to take your position statement and the ABT you have written from your customer's point of view and now write your brand point of view, highlighting how you can fulfill your customers' wishes and wants through your product or service better than anyone else. In the process, you will design a new category where you are king. And that's just the and segment of the Story Cycle System. Act 1 essentially is the first 3 chapters where you have effectively set the stage with your position statement, identified your number one audience or customer, what they wish for and want, and how you are uniquely positioned to help them get it, all in the name of category design. I mentioned at the top of the show that SeedSpot named the Business of Story as the number one business storytelling podcast for 2022. That makes me category king, at least in the SeedSpot poll. So how about you? Are you sitting atop your category? If not, no worries, because we'll help you get there through the Story Cycle System. But now it's time to venture into the problem you are solving for your customers, starting with Chapter 4, Disruption. Look, if your audience or customer is not being disrupted by either outside forces or by you, then they will remain in status quo and have no reason to invest in your product or service. So you have to do your homework and be crystal clear about what is changing in their world and how you are there to bridge the gap to help them get what they want. It's here in Chapter 4 where you take a stab at your unique value proposition based on what you have defined as your position statement, your number one audience, their wishes and wants, and what is now changing in their life that makes you the most timely and relevant solution to their problem, or their category king. Then you capture your story in your unique value proposition. For example, in Chapter 4 of Brand Bewitchery, I detail the Clinica Adelante transformation story. This was a community health center that went from near bankruptcy in 2009 to growing by more than 600%, precisely because they reimagined their brand story for a changing market and landed on their ideal value proposition based from a new and refined market position. Category design. Clinica Adelante was a federally qualified health center in Maricopa County, Arizona, having received its first federal grant in 1979. However, the community health center had been founded years earlier as a free farm worker clinic. Clinica Adelante's mission was to improve the health of our communities by providing quality, comprehensive primary health care regardless of a patient's ability to pay. That's what the whole organization was based on. But Arizona immigration laws, urban sprawl, increased competition in the healthcare market, and the Great Recession threatened the organization's survival. Therefore, we guided Clinica Adelante through the story cycle system, and we authored a refreshed brand story that celebrated the organization's legacy while creating an aspirational narrative of, quote, sustainable healthcare for all, unquote. The clinic's new purpose-driven brand story was supported by 3 brand pillars of operating as a financial, cultural, and environmentally sustainable organization. The business results have been off the charts. By 2019, Adelante had quadrupled in size and scope with 550-plus employees, over $80 million in annual revenue, 75,000 unique patients from newborns to centenarians, and 9 health center locations providing over 252,000 encounters per year. As an expression of its sustainable healthcare for all unique value proposition, Adelante opened the nation's first and currently only LEED Platinum certified community health center in Mesa, Arizona. Plus, Adelante now has 2 LEED Gold certified centers in Peoria and Goodyear. You can hear Aveen Sate-Tafoya tell the Clinica Adelante story on show number 160, how a purpose-driven brand story will increase the health of your organization. So what is your unique value proposition? One of the best ways to arrive at it is, again, by using the ABT. Here's another quick example for you, using Wesleyan Greer's ABT that articulates her UVP. Quote, you are a CEO of a STEM company and you have tremendous opportunity for growth, but sales have stagnated because your underperforming sales leader has the wrong skill set to ensure predictable revenue. Therefore, you can upskill your people to hit quota monthly through my sales leadership blueprint developed from my knowledge of the scientific process, specifically designed to help STEM companies grow. And Wesleyan's unique value proposition is the science of selling STEM. You can hear her story on show number 328. Now on to Chapter 5, Antagonists, how to capitalize on competitive forces. A client of mine, Trevor Hill, once said to me, Park, you know what sales is? I go, what? I asked. Find the hurt, amplify the pain, heal the wound, he mentioned. I thought Trevor was rather profound when I first heard his definition of sales some 20 years ago. Oh, and did you notice its 3-act structure? Find the hurt, amplify the pain, heal the wound. Well, in Chapter 4 of Disruption, we have found the hurt. Now we're going to amplify the pain in Chapter 5 and start healing the wound in Chapter 6. All of this happening in the but section, or Act 2, of the story cycle system. When you are considering antagonists, I want you to think of those forces that may be holding back your customer and the forces that are thwarting the progress of your organization. Because to help your customers, you need to help yourself first. For your brand storytelling purposes, I've broken these oppositional forces down into 3 primary categories: villains, fog, and crevasses. Villains are defined by internal and external competitive forces, including competitors undercutting you, resource scarcity like time, money, and staff, and your internal demons that summon fear and self-doubt to demoralize and detour you. Fear is often our greatest foil. Fog is you and your customers' blind spots. What you don't know, you don't know. But to your credit, even though you're not totally sure yet that you're on the right path with your brand story, at least this podcast and the book Brand Bewitchery has equipped you with a proven field guide to help you navigate the jungle and clear the air ahead. You also want to really know what the blind spots are for your customers, because those are the stories you are going to tell to reveal the truth about you and your brand. Crevasses are the gaps between your mental plans and your operational execution. Crevasses are also the gaps between what your customers wish for and want. You think and say one thing, but you're doing something else. I'm not throwing you under the bus here at all. We all do this. But you must mind the gap, because your new brand story will be making big, wish-fulfilling promises to your audiences, and you'll need to deliver on those promises. The jujitsu trick is not to combat these forces, but to use them to your advantage to further power your will and catapult your offering. Plus, when you examine the villains, fog, and crevasses that confront your customers, and you can help them overcome these obstacles and antagonists, you become the go-to brand in their mind. So your exercise is to first consider your brand and what are the villains, fog, and crevasses you're up against. And then consider your customer and the villains, fog, and crevasses they're battling. You'll find camaraderie in your worlds when you leverage these oppositional forces to your favor. So how are you uniquely equipped to help your audience navigate the disruption in the world and overcome their villains, fog, and crevasses as their mentor or guide? That's what we cover in Chapter 6, The Mentor, how to humanize your brand with its promise, gift, and personality. Okay, we're halfway through the story cycle system. You've functionally defined your number one position in the marketplace, what you do differently and more distinctively than anyone else, and I hope you have or will craft an ABT that captures and starts to humanize your functional positioning. Then in Chapter 2, you have prioritized your top 3 audiences, considering inner, outer, and other important people you need to buy into your brand story. These are the heroes in your story. Then you focused on your number one audience / customer in Chapter 3, stakes. You've considered what they wish for and want. You've even updated your ABT, identifying this persona at the beginning of it. In Chapter 4, disruption, or the beginning of Act 2, you find the hurt or the problem they're dealing with. What must change in their world, and how are you there as the most urgent, relevant, and timely offering to help them get what they want, as captured in your unique value proposition? Then to amplify the pain in Chapter 5, you identify and embrace the villains, fog, and crevasses that you will help them overcome with your offering. So have you noticed something here? In these first 5 steps of the story cycle system, with the exception of setting the stage in Chapter 1 with your backstory, it's all about your number one audience, be they your customers, colleagues, or the community you serve. This is the fundamental shift you will need to make if you want to be successful with the story cycle and all of your brand storytelling. You are not the hero of your story. Your audience always is. They are at the center of your story. They're your hero, your protagonist. Understand where they are on their journey and the stories they're telling themselves about you, about your offering, even about the market you're in and your competition. See it from their point of view. Then you'll truly know what stories to share to help them see and embrace the world the way you do. What's in it for them? Why should they care? Now in Chapter 6, The Mentor, it's all about you. Think of this chapter as character development for the mentor, guide, or sidekick. Yes, that's you and your brand in your story. You will do the OO exercise to find your brand promise, your brand gift, and your brand personality archetype. I know that's a lot, but it's fun and it's so worth it because these character traits will inform everything from your look, feel, and tone of voice, creating consistency and cohesion in all of your marketing and messaging. From your website to collateral materials to social media to sales presentations to internal communications to how you answer the phone. You will first identify your brand's character traits using just 9 words. You find these one-word descriptions using the OO exercise, and it's pretty fun. The 3 O's in OO stand for your organization, offering, and outcomes. And you're going to find 3 one-word descriptors for each of these categories. Your organization / your company, your offering, the product or service that you provide, and the outcomes you make happen in your customers' lives. You can do the OO exercise by yourself or assemble your team, customers, vendors, friends, family members, anyone who routinely comes in contact with your brand. Give everyone in the room 9 Post-it notes. Ask them to write 3 one-word descriptors for each category, 1 word per Post-it. When everyone's done writing, put them up on a whiteboard or the wall under the different categories of organization, offering, and outcome. Look for the trending words, the gaps, the outliers, and have a conversation to ultimately arrive at your 9 one-word descriptors. You essentially are unearthing stories that support your brand because the next step is to use each descriptor to prompt a story about how it shows up in your business. For instance, with the business of story, my 9 one-word descriptors are as follow. Under organization, the 3 character traits I use to help define my company are mage, industrious, and optimistic. Under offering, which are the live and virtual mastery courses and mastery classes I teach on the 3 proven narrative frameworks, here are the 3 words that I use. They are primal, dynamic, and truth. And finally, to describe outcomes, what our clients and customers receive when taking our courses, reading our books, and using our tools is truth, clarity, and connection. From Chapter 6 in Brand Bewitchery, here's how I describe each of these 9 one-word descriptors or character traits of the business of story. As I read them, think of your own descriptors and how they show up in your business to define your brand. All right. Let's begin with operations. Mage, industrious, optimistic. Mage. At the business of story, we teach the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling. I also believe that if content is king, as so many content marketers profess, then storytelling is the kingdom's sorcerer, because telling stories is where the magic happens. That's why I believe our people are mages of sorts, magicians or learned people who are steeped in activating the mechanics and charisma of storytelling. Next up is industrious. Our expertise comes from being industrious. Synonyms include diligent, hardworking, and studious, which further underscores our approach to helping people reignite their inner storyteller. But I particularly like its root meaning, skillful, clever, and ingenious. We've experienced that the use of storytelling and branding is an ingenious skill to make your brand marketing points in a brilliant way that enchants the human mind. Optimistic. As an organization, we are optimistic. While the world seems to be overwhelmed with information and interpersonally disconnected by technology and has become polarized, nationalized, and ideologicalized, we've seen how an anecdote is the antidote that brings people back together, finding common ground through a shared story. So we encourage you to tell stories on purpose. Next category in our OO exercise is offering. Here I have primal, dynamic, and truth. Primal. The 3 words that describe our offering naturally begin with primal. Homo sapiens are the only creatures we know of that think in story. We use narrative as our central organizing force, creating imagined realities that we collectively live into. That's why storytelling is not a gimmick, but has been a proven evolutionary tool since the beginning of recorded time. We are storytelling apes. Therefore, it makes sense to evolve as storytelling leaders. Dynamic. Like thermodynamics, storytelling has an energy force all its own. Inspired by the definition of physics, story dynamics is the narrative science that studies imagination and its motion and behavior through the space and time of a story and its related entities of energy and force. Story dynamics is one of the most fundamental communication disciplines. Its main goal is to help us understand how the universe behaves through the stories we tell and live. We help you use stories to nudge the world in any direction you choose. Truth. The singular purpose of a story is to reveal a truth. From truth comes trust. Sure, you can use stories to tell untruths. Comedian Stephen Colbert even coined the term truthiness, describing something that is masquerading as genuine. But the fact is, with story, the truth eventually prevails. Finally, the words that describe the outcomes the business of story creates in people's lives include clarity, connection, and ultimately trust. Clarity. The sole purpose of the three proven narrative frameworks of the ABT, the five primal elements of a short story, and the story cycle system is to evolve you from an intuitive to an intentional storyteller to ultimately clarify your message. Clarity amplifies your impact because you make it easy for your audience to understand you and be open to your ask. Plus, a clear and concise story helps you simplify your journey by focusing your mission on what's truly important to your success. Connection. Storytelling is the Velcro of collaboration. As the storyteller, you start by understanding your audience's journey and empathizing with what they wish for and want. Then you share a story that they can appreciate to hook your two worlds together, creating a stronger whole. There is no more powerful uniting force between two human beings than experiencing a shared story. Finally, there's trust. The truth about storytelling is that you use it to become confident in your authentic personal narrative and focused on your journey while gaining the trust of your audiences. Stories reveal truths that create trust. Besides triggering stories for you and your teams to use to talk about your brand from the 9 one-word descriptors, they will also lead to that one word that reflects the emotional promise you make to your customers. For me, the business of story, that one word that reflects our emotional promise is enchantment. And I landed on that because so many people have told me how enchanting the process is to them. Our goal is to enchant you with the wizardry of storytelling so that you can use its primal power to delight your customers, who in turn will experience a more captivating narrative. When we are all engrossed in these stories together, our individual and collective human potential simply grows. By the way, the antonyms for enchantment are repulsion, misery, and boredom. Yikes. But these negatives strengthen our promise because they represent the antagonists we are pushing against. I mean, when was the last time you were bored into buying anything? So tell a story. Now we have a common foe, boredom. So when you and your team select your one-word promise, review its antonyms and see those as the human emotions you are helping your customers overcome. By having your team work with you on this exercise, it will further ensure their buy-in to your entire brand narrative. They need to believe in it as strongly as you do. So now that you've identified your 9 one-word descriptors and your emotional promise, that is how you make people feel when interacting with your brand, what is the gift your brand provides beyond your product or service? How do you fulfill your customer's wish? 3 of my favorite examples are Red Bull, which gives you wings. That's the gift. Booking.com that ends its spots declaring Booking.yeah, that's its gift. And of course, Apple, that makes you think different. At the Business of Story, we make brand and business storytelling more accessible through our proven storytelling framework. By teaching you the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling, we are conjuring your latent storytelling superpowers to strengthen your connection with people and move them to action. Ultimately, what we make happen is to enable you to excel through the stories you tell. We enchant you internally with our promise and help you excel externally by becoming a more confident and influential communicator. This gift ultimately became our tagline or unique value proposition: excel through the stories you tell. One last fun exercise for you is to review the 12 Jungian personality archetypes and determine which one most reflects the personality of your brand. You can even add one or two supporting archetypes. These include the innocent, the regular guy-gal, the hero, the caregiver, the explorer, the rebel, the lover, the creator, the jester, the sage, the magician, and the ruler. You can see an image of these archetypes in the show notes with a link to a deck that describes each archetype in detail. Find the archetype or types that best express your brand personality, and then use those traits to inform the design, look, feel, user experience, and tone of all of your content, which, by the way, you can start developing from the stories you unearthed from your OO exercise and the promise and gift you arrived at for your brand. See, you're already developing your story marketing content. Let's move on to Chapter 7, called The Journey. You will do two things here. First, you will identify where your audience is on their journey with you, from brand awareness, just learning about your offering. Maybe they're in brand adoption, where they've already bought into you and your story, or they're in brand appreciation, where they are becoming a repeat customer and sharing your story with their world. The second thing you want to do in Chapter 7 is to start collecting and sharing stories prompted by your 9 one-word descriptors from the U exercise. And you want to communicate your emotional promise and the intrinsic gift your audiences will receive from you and your brand offering, depending on where they are in the awareness, adoption, and appreciation stages. In Brand Bewitchery, there's a simple map to help you chart your customer journey with your brand. Chapter 8, Victory. You want to map the mile markers of success your customers will experience with you so that they know they are on the right journey for them as the central character in your brand story. Help them get what they want every step of the way, and they will go out of their way to help you as a brand get what you want. Chapter 9 is the moral of your story. It is here, after all you've been through, clarifying your brand story with the story cycle system, that you amplify your impact by declaring your brand purpose, what you stand for beyond selling a product or service that makes you stand out. For instance, of the many case stories I share in Brand Bewitchery that you will learn from, here are some of the brand purposes. The purpose of the Business of Story is to help you live into and prosper from your most powerful stories. Excel through the stories you tell. Heirloom is an all-natural allergy supplement, but its greater purpose is to help people inhale a healthy dose of life. Let's take it a step further. The purpose of Oasis LLC, the makers of Heirloom, is to ameliorate human suffering. Eco Driving Solutions provides fleet training programs to fulfill its purpose of helping people arrive healthy, happy, and safe. While most people think of Goodwill Industries as running thrift stores that fund their workforce development programs, they truly exist to help people realize the treasure of having a good job. Adelante Healthcare is a community health center fulfilling its purpose of providing sustainable health care for all. Global Water is a water utility, but it exists to help people access the renewable resources of water so that they can flourish. Red Bull exists to give wings to people and ideas. Airbnb exists to help people feel like they belong anywhere. Prate Auto Partes sells used cars to at-risk buyers, but this is just the brand's vehicle to serve its purpose of helping people get back on the road to financial freedom. Crystal Head Vodka exists to help people enlighten their creative spirit. From the list above, which is more intoxicating to you, the product or the purpose? So what is your purpose? What do you stand for that makes you stand out? What is the moral of your brand story? Finally, you have arrived at Chapter 10 of the Story Cycle System, which is all about building the ritualistic use of your brand offering. This is where you simplify your life by building repeat business with your raving fans that are happy to share your story through word-of-mouth marketing. As Walt Disney said, do what you do so well that they will want to see it again and bring their friends. Here are 3 ways you can start building rituals for your brand use. Build on reality. Humans naturally ritualize behaviors, so capitalize on this tendency by ritualizing existing product functionality in consumer behavior. For instance, when we teach Business of Story workshop attendees about how to craft an and, but, therefore statement to focus the theme of their message, I ask them to begin every future email they write with an ABT for practice. Look, we all write dozens of emails every day, so this natural activity becomes a perfect proving ground for ritualizing the use of a storytelling framework in a ubiquitous activity. I call it curling your storytelling dumbbell because using the ABT strengthens your narrative intuition. Try it. You'll find the ABT reduces your email writing time by as much as 2/3. Plus, your readers will love you for it because they'll actually easily understand what you're asking and communicating about, and it will save them time interpreting your message. What routine behaviors that intersect with your offering can you build upon with your customers? The next step is embed meaning. Don't confuse a ritual with a habit. You must make it meaningful to create a belief from an action. Otherwise, it's just a behavior. Supporters of breast cancer awareness, for instance, wear the now omnipresent pink ribbon because of the meaning and empowerment it represents towards the eradication of this awful disease. Apple's logo with a bite out of it has become synonymous with individuality as you disrupt the rules and think different. How can you embed meaning in your offering? At the Business of Story, we embed meaning in our mentoring on the applied science and bewitchery of storytelling by giving every keynote, workshop, and masterclass participant a What's Your Story field guide to keep by their side long after the session is over. It's where they capture their notes and it becomes a meaningful reminder of the power of story in their life. Define rules. Rituals often have a prescribed way of doing them. Wash, rinse, repeat clearly states the rules of use that shampoo manufacturers would like you to follow every time you're in the shower. Why? Because they get to double sales that way. Creators of these kinds of brand rituals leave nothing to chance. Is there a ritual rule you can dictate about the use of your offering? I, for example, love using proverbs as rule conveyors. Benjamin Franklin was brilliant with the life rules he defined by using proverbs. Early to bed, early to rise, helps make a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Proverbs are like little powder kegs of storytelling that communicate and make memorable a universal rule. Think of or make up your own proverb to communicate a defined rule for your offering. A proverbial rule I like to use to encourage the continual study and use of our approach to business storytelling is this, quote, "You have to understand the magic to cast the spell." Rituals are similar to stories because they are always about a moment connected to a specific place and time. For instance, to anchor the Goodwill brand in the context of the second largest retail shopping season of the year, we created a campaign that promoted Goodwill as the official sponsor of Halloween to ritualize the costume hunt for shoppers. And when you head to Goodwill for your goblin getup, American Express reminds you of the ritual around its credit card. Don't leave home without it. So that's it, your 10-step story cycle system that is a marvelous brand story strategy framework. It'll teach you the powerful storytelling techniques, including the ABT and the 5 primal elements of a short story for big impact throughout the entire process of crafting your brand story through the cycle. Well, I hope you found this 350th edition of the Business of Story particularly, especially helpful in crafting your brand story. If you know of anyone else that could use some help out there, then by all means, feel free to share this episode with them. Grab your copy of Brand Bewitchery on Amazon or Apple Books, and don't forget to pick up its companion book, The Narrative Gem for Business. It's that crisp 75-page guide that takes you on a deep dive into crafting powerful and persuasive ABTs. And of course, tap into the ABTs of branding and the ABTs of selling quick online courses at businessofstory.thinkific.com. In celebration of this 350th episode, you will save 35% off the $35 course cost if you register before the end of this month, March 2022. And as you grow as a more confident and compelling and persuasive communicator, remember that the most potent story you'll ever tell is the story you tell yourself. So make it a great one. Thanks so much for celebrating number 350 with me. Story on, my friend.